Okay, second talk of the day. I'm going to use some cards again as prompts for this. But what I'm going to talk about now is so in the last talk I talked about how symmetrical and asymmetrical thinking were two types of thinking: all, same, and forever. That's symmetrical thinking. Some, different, and for a while. That's asymmetrical thinking. And what I said was that these are very interesting from the point of view of project management. So why are they interesting from the point of view of project management? The other thing to remember is that the subconscious really likes symmetrical thinking, same, all, and forever. So things in the subconscious tend to be imagined as forever. And that brings us to our first kind of aspect of project management that is very relevant. That's time. So the interesting thing about time, and I've written it down here as well, is its relationship to change. So things that are forever don't change. And that means that things that are in existence stay in existence forever. But also it means that things that aren't in existence are never going to come into existence because there's no change. Now this sounds crazy, but if you've spent any time around projects, you realize there is this aspect of projects, which is that people behave or talk sometimes as if once the idea is in place, somehow it already exists. So there is this kind of thinking that kind of once you've thought of something, then it kind of exists in the world. And part of that is this kind of symmetrical thinking that the subconscious does, that kind of like things that are there forever, and things that aren't there will never be there. And it would sound crazy if you didn't see people behaving in this way. And one of the bits of evidence that people do behave in this way, and this is what they're thinking, is this: difficult to fit on a card and difficult to get anybody to do on a project. Prioritization. So why do I think this is connected to a symmetrical subconscious way of thinking? Because what you're doing by prioritizing things is you're forcing an asymmetrical way of looking at the world, that some things are in existence and some things aren't, that some things will come into existence before others. Now, if you don't know this, if you haven't had any experience of working on projects, the standard response to asking people who want something in a project to prioritize the list of things that they want in the project is that they want everything. And I think this is really strongly connected to the idea that I just talked about of, in some way, when people think about an idea, they imagine that it already exists and that it will exist forever. So by prioritizing things, you're essentially saying some things will come into existence before others. And for some reason, people find this intolerable. I think what it is that they imagine the things that aren't at the top of the list will it is kind of related to this kind of time thing, will never come into existence. And so I think this, like the struggle that we have to get to people to prioritize things, is a clue that they are thinking in this symmetrical, subconscious way in terms of all and forever and same. And another aspect of this, something that's connected to this, is I've kind of like talked about it when I've talked about symmetrical and asymmetrical, is the difference between ideas and reality. Quite often when you're talking about these things, it's very difficult to talk about them without sounding condescending or insulting. But there is an aspect of the difference between ideas and reality, which is very, very important, which almost never gets talked about. I'm going to try and talk about it just now. And that is this idea, intentionality. You've probably not heard that word unless I think it's really only a word that's used in philosophy. Maybe it's used in some other academic disciplines. I don't hear it every day. And what intentionality is the idea that there is a difference between a statement about the world and the world. A statement about the world has some kind of aboutness that points to the world, but those two things aren't the same. So the example that I give in the book is that if you have a cat sitting on a mat, you can write a sentence in whatever language you want, saying the cat sits on the mat, the cat is sitting on the mat. So you can write those words down. You can make noises. The cat sits on the mat. You can even draw a picture. But all of those things, if you think about the Belgian surrealist whose name evades me now, Ceci n'est pas un pipe, apologies, pardon my French. That's a picture of a pipe that says this isn't a pipe. And so the descriptions and the thing are different things. And this is something that we're constantly wrestling with when it comes to project management, because the description will be in some way impoverished relative to the thing, because the thing is a thing in the real world, and things in the real world have all sorts of properties that the description doesn't have. And also, it's like a quote that I mentioned in my book in this chapter is a quote from Iris Murdoch. She says, "Every novel is the wreck of a perfect idea." There is this idea that the thing that's in the world is somehow this kind of catastrophic wreck. It's a travesty of the perfect idea. But this travesty of the perfect idea in the world has this major benefit over the thing, the idea, which is that it can actually do things. It can actually work in the real world. It can actually deliver value. It can do the things that users need to do. It can do things that businesses need to have happen. So there is this kind of big difference between a description of something and the real thing. And part of thinking symmetrically and in terms of same and all and forever is not understanding that difference between the description of something and the world. And one of the ways that that comes out, which is extremely problematic, is if you have a description and you don't think a description is different from the world, you're going to come across lots of problems when you try and match up the description to the world. For example, when you try and decide when something is done, when a description of something and the thing in the world are the same, you're going to struggle to figure out when they're done. So this is an aspect of symmetrical and asymmetrical thinking, which I think is extremely important. And it's also, I'm kind of astounded that these things don't get talked about more in one sense, because I think thinking about the world in terms of some and different and for a short time is an extremely powerful way of countering the kind of initial intuitive way that people go into projects, which is thinking about making the project is about making something in the world that is the same as some kind of specification, and that what's important is that we get all of the things that are listed in that specification, and that once we've got the specification, in essence, the kind of hard work is done, and the difference between excuse me, I'm going to have a sip of my tea. The difference between the idea of something and its implementation isn't a tricky thing. It's a straightforward thing. We can decide when something that we've made matches the specification, and making that happen is not a problematic thing. It's that dreaded phrase, just a matter of programming. I'm going to stop there.